You're a goddamn nurse. Your job is to fetch supplies and shut up. Dr. Ryan Prescott grabbed the mop out of her hands and threw it against the wall. The handle cracked. Dirty water splashed across Claire Donovan's scrubs. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, watching the man on the gurney bleed to death because this Ivy League surgeon was pressing 2 inches from the artery that mattered. His blood hit the ceiling in a rhythm she knew better than her own heartbeat. Femoral, complete transection. 60 seconds until the brain starts dying. She had tried to tell him. He told her to shut up. Now the monitor was screaming, the patient was coding, and the most brilliant surgeon hiding in this hospital was standing in a puddle of mop water, deciding whether to let a man die or destroy the only life she had left. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow Claire's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story reaches. Now let's go back to where it all started. 14 months. That was how long Claire Donovan had been mopping floors at Ridgewood General Hospital in suburban Chicago. 14 months of, "Yes, doctor," and "Sorry, doctor," and "I'll clean that up right away." 14 months of wearing scrubs 2 sizes too big so nobody would notice the compact muscle underneath. 14 months of keeping her head down, her mouth shut, and her hands busy with work that a teenager could do. Her badge said Claire Donovan, RN, float pool. 5 words: temporary, forgettable, disposable. Exactly what she needed to be. She pushed her mop down the 3rd-floor corridor on a Tuesday morning. Auburn ponytail held together with a dollar store elastic, shoulders hunched forward like she was apologizing for taking up space. Her gray-green eyes stayed fixed on the linoleum, but they moved constantly behind that curtain of submission, tracking monitor readings through doorways, counting respirations of patients she passed, catching the slight bluish tint around Mr. Patterson's lips in room 308 that nobody else on the floor had noticed. "Donovan," the voice hit her back like a slap. "Hey, mop lady, I'm talking to you." She stopped. She didn't turn around. She already knew. Dr. Ryan Prescott walked her and planted himself in her path. 33 years old, 6 feet tall, jaw like a magazine cover, white coat so crisp it could cut paper. His name was embroidered above the pocket in blue thread, and he wore it the way some men wear a badge, not because they earned it, but because they needed everyone to see it. Room 312. Patient threw up all over the bed rail. Again. He checked his watch like Claire's existence was wasting his time. And the supply closet in trauma needs restocking. Dr. Chen asked 2 hours ago. "I'll take care of it, Dr. Prescott." "You'll take care of it now." He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the coffee on his breath. "Not after your break. Not after you finish sleepwalking with that mop. Now." "Yes, doctor." He turned to the 2 interns trailing behind him. That's the difference between people who went to medical school and people who didn't. One group gives orders, the other follows them. He said it loud enough for the whole corridor to hear. Claire's hands tightened on the mop handle until her knuckles went white. The shrapnel scars across the backs of her fingers stretched. If anyone had ever looked closely enough, they would have wondered how a float pool nurse got scars like those. But nobody ever looked closely at Claire Donovan. She cleaned the vomit in room 312 without complaint. She restocked the supply closet in trauma. She emptied a sharps container. She did every single task a float pool nurse was supposed to do, and she did it quietly, invisibly, and without a trace of the woman she used to be. On her way past room 308, she paused at the nurse's station. Ruth, the veteran charge nurse, was charting. "Hey, Ruth, Mr. Patterson in 308 looked a little off when I was in there. Might want to check his oxygen." Ruth frowned. "Off how?" "I don't know, just off." Claire shrugged the way someone shrugs when they don't want to seem too smart. "I'm probably wrong." She wasn't wrong. Patterson's oxygen was at 84%. Ruth caught it. The respiratory team responded. Nobody thanked Claire. Nobody connected it to her. She'd been doing this for 14 months. Invisible interventions. Anonymous saves. A word dropped here, a supply left open there. A casual observation that somehow always turned out to be right. It was the only way she could practice medicine without being a doctor. And it was the only way she could live with herself. Because the truth about Claire Donovan would have broken this hospital wide open. Every morning she woke up in a one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. No photographs on the walls, no personal items. A locked, fireproof box under the bed that she never opened. She made black coffee, ate dry toast, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. "You're Claire," she told her reflection. "You're nobody." But the reflection didn't cooperate. The eyes were too sharp. The jaw was too set. The posture kept straightening itself before she could force it back into a hunch. And the hands gripping the sink edge were the hands of a woman who had held a 19-year-old Marine's heart in her palm and squeezed it back to life while rockets turned the walls to dust. Lieutenant Colonel Emma Claire Stratton, United States Army Medical Corps. Call sign Valkyrie. Distinguished Service Cross. Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart. The most decorated female combat surgeon in modern military history. She had killed that woman 14 months ago, buried her under a fake name and a mop and a badge that said, "Float Pool." And every single morning, that dead woman tried to claw her way back out of the grave. Back at Ridgewood, the afternoon shift dragged. Claire finished her rounds and headed toward the break room. Her pager buzzed. Float nurses almost never got paged. Trauma bay. Assist needed. She walked through the double doors and the charge nurse barely glanced up. "Donovan, Bay 3, it's a mess. Grab a mop." Claire took the mop into Bay 3 and started cleaning. On the gurney, a man in his 40s lay unconscious, hard hat still on. His left leg was shredded below the knee, wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. The paramedic's tourniquet was slipping. Blood pulsed through the gauze in a steady rhythm that told Claire everything. Femoral artery, complete transection. 2 liters lost already based on the floor volume. Systolic pressure somewhere around 70. She glanced at the monitor without appearing to glance. 70/42. She'd been off by a fraction. Dr. Prescott strode in, gloves snapped on, jaw set, ready to perform. Behind him, Dr. Patel, a second-year resident, carried the instrument tray. His hands shook so instruments rattled. "Eddie Vargas, 41, the paramedic reported. Construction site, partial amputation, left lower extremity. Tourniquet failing. Last pressure, 78 systolic. Dropping." "I see it." Prescott positioned himself at the bedside. "Direct pressure on the femoral. Patel, stand by with the clamp tray." He pressed both hands against Eddie Vargas's upper thigh. Hard, confident, and 2 inches from where it mattered. Claire saw the mistake instantly. He was compressing against muscle belly instead of bone. The artery was sliding away from the pressure like a garden hose under a boot that wasn't on it. Every beat of Eddie Vargas's weakening heart pumped more blood past Prescott's useless hands and onto the floor. 68/38. 65/36. The monitor numbers fell like a countdown. "Page vascular," Prescott said, pressing harder in the same wrong spot. "Vascular's in surgery," a nurse called. 40 minutes minimum. 40 minutes. Eddie Vargas had 3. "Dr. Prescott," Claire's voice was quiet, respectful, the voice of a woman who knew her place. "Your hand position. If you move 2 inches medial and compress against the pelvic bone instead of the muscle." Prescott didn't even turn around. "Did I ask you?" "No, but the artery." Now he turned. His face was flushed. Sweat ran down his temples. Fear and ego fought each other behind his eyes, and ego won the way it always did. "I know where the femoral artery is, Donovan. I graduated top of my class at Northwestern. I did my residency at Hopkins. You went to what, community college?" He pointed at the door. "Get out of my trauma bay." Claire stood there. The mop handle was slick in her grip. On the monitor, Eddie Vargas's pressure dropped to 60/34. She took a step toward the door. "Pressure's tanking," the monitoring nurse said. 55/30. Another step. 52/28. "Doctor, we're losing him." One more step. She was almost out, almost invisible again. "V-fib!" Patel screamed. "He's in V-fib!" A young nurse climbed onto the gurney and started chest compressions. But Claire knew what nobody else in that room understood. Every compression squeezed blood out through the severed artery faster than it could circulate. About Corporal Danny Matthews, 19 years old, who bled to death in her arms because the medevac helicopter arrived 2 minutes too late. She carried his face in her nightmares every night for 14 months. She had walked away from medicine because of that face. Because she couldn't save everyone, and the ones she couldn't save were eating her alive. But Eddie Vargas was 41 years old. She could see the wedding ring on his left hand. There was a wife out there in that waiting room. Kids, probably. A family holding their breath and praying to God that the doctors on the other side of those doors knew what they were doing. The monitor screamed. Flatline. Continuous tone. The sound of a heart that had stopped fighting. "No pulse," Patel shouted. "He's coding. Asystole. Start CPR." Claire's hand opened. The mop hit the floor. The sound cracked through the room like a rifle shot. She turned around. The hunch disappeared. Her shoulders rolled back. Her spine went straight. Her chin came up. She seemed to grow 3 inches in a single breath. Her gray-green eyes, which had spent 14 months staring at linoleum, lifted and swept the room with the cold, precise focus of a woman who had operated on dying soldiers while the building around her burned. She walked back into the trauma bay, not fast, not slow, with the kind of certainty that makes people step aside without knowing why. "Move," she said to the nurse doing compressions. The nurse froze. "Off the gurney, now." The nurse scrambled down. Prescott spun around. His mouth opened, but nothing came out for a full second. "What the hell are you?" "Clamp." Claire held out her right hand. Palm up. Fingers steady. "Large Kelly clamp. Put it in my hand." "You have no authority to." "He's been in asystole for 40 seconds. His brain is dying. You can write me up, fire me, have me arrested. I don't care. But you will put a clamp in my hand, or you will explain to his wife why you let him die to protect your ego. Choose. Now." The room held its breath. Patel reached across the tray. His hands were trembling so violently he almost dropped the clamp twice. He placed it in Claire's palm. Claire didn't pause. She plunged her right hand into the wound. Blood surged past her wrist, soaking her forearm, flooding the oversized scrubs. The entire maneuver took 11 seconds. "Pressure," she called. The monitoring nurse's voice shook. 60/35. 65. 68. It's rising. 2 units O negative. Pressure bags on both. Wide open. Move. Nobody questioned her. Nobody argued. They moved. The blood went up. Claire watched the monitor with the patience of someone who understood that you cannot rush a body back from the dead. You can only give it what it needs and wait. The first unit went in. Pressure climbed to 75. Claire started manual compressions, not the panicked pumping the nurse had been doing. Slow, deliberate, timed to the transfusion like a metronome. "Come on, Eddie," she whispered against the chaos. "You've got people waiting for you. Not today." 80/45. "Come on." 85/50. The monitor beeped. Irregular at first, then finding rhythm, then holding it. "Sinus rhythm," the monitoring nurse said, and her voice broke. "We have sinus. BP 85/50 and climbing." Eddie Vargas gasped. His eyes open, wild and terrified and alive. His chest heaved. His fingers curled around the gurney rail. Claire stepped back. Her arms were red to the elbows. Blood dripped from her fingertips onto the floor she'd been mopping 5 minutes earlier. She looked at the staff. "Get him to OR. He needs vascular repair within the hour. Page Dr. Chen." They rushed the gurney out. The room emptied in seconds. And then it was just Claire and Prescott, in the silence that follows when someone's world falls apart. Prescott stood in the corner. His white coat was ruined. His hands hung at his sides. His face had lost every trace of the arrogance that had defined him for 33 years. He stared at Claire like he was seeing her for the first time. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Claire didn't answer. She looked down at her blood-soaked scrubs, at the badge that said Claire Donovan, RN, float pool, at the shrapnel scars on her hands, visible now under the harsh fluorescent light, at the thin scar through her left eyebrow that nobody had ever noticed because nobody had ever looked. The door opened behind her. Dr. Chen stood there, surgical cap still on, her face frozen somewhere between shock and recognition. "Claire," Chen's voice was barely above a whisper. "What did you just do?" "My job," Claire said. "No." Chen stepped closer. "That wasn't nursing. That blind femoral clamp, the compression timing, the way you directed this room. I've been a surgeon for 30 years and I couldn't have done what you just did. Not that fast. Not that clean." She paused. "Who are you?" Claire looked Chen in the eye. For the first time in 14 months, she didn't look away. "Nobody," she said. "I'm nobody." But the word tasted like ash in her mouth. And before Chen could press further, a sound cut through the hospital that turned Claire's blood to ice. Helicopter rotors. Close. Getting closer. Not the rhythmic thump of a medical helicopter. This was heavier, faster, military. Claire's whole body went rigid. Her pupils contracted. The scar above her eyebrow throbbed with a phantom pain she hadn't felt in 14 months. "Medevac inbound!" somebody shouted from the ambulance bay. "Multiple casualties. Gunshot wounds and blast injuries. ETA 2 minutes." Gunshot wounds. Blast injuries. Combat casualties coming to a civilian hospital in suburban Chicago. Coming here. To her hospital. To her hiding place. And whoever was on those helicopters might know the face of the woman the entire military had spent 14 months trying to make disappear. Claire looked at her blood-soaked hands. Steady. Still steady. The hands of a ghost who had just made herself visible to the entire world. She could hear the helicopters directly overhead now. The windows rattled. The fluorescent lights swayed. And somewhere inside her chest, the woman she had buried 14 months ago opened her eyes, took a breath, and refused to die again. Claire Donovan was finished. Valkyrie was coming back. The helicopter rotors shook the windows hard enough to rattle the blinds. Claire stood in the trauma bay with Eddie Vargas's blood drying on her arms and the sound of military aircraft drilling into her skull like a memory she couldn't outrun. She had maybe 60 seconds to disappear. Claire turned toward the back corridor, the one that led past the supply rooms and out through the loading dock. She knew every exit in this hospital. She had mapped them her first week, the way a soldier maps escape routes in hostile territory. Force of habit. The kind of habit you pick up when people have tried to kill you more than once. She made it 4 steps before Dr. Chen's voice stopped her cold. "Don't you dare walk away from me, Claire." Claire froze. Her back was to Chen. Her hands were still red to the elbows. She could feel the attending's eyes boring into her spine. "2 patients are about to come through those doors," Chen said. "Gunshot wounds, blast injuries, combat casualties in my emergency department. And the only person in this building who just demonstrated she can handle that level of trauma is walking toward the back door." Chen paused. "Turn around." Claire didn't move. "That's not a request." Claire turned. Chen was standing 10 feet away with her arms crossed and her surgical cap still on. Behind her, the trauma team was scrambling. Nurses were pulling extra crash carts into position. Patel was setting up a second instrument tray with hands that still hadn't stopped shaking. Prescott was nowhere in sight. "I'm a float pool nurse," Claire said. The words sounded hollow even to her. "You just performed a blind femoral clamp that our vascular chief said he wouldn't attempt without fluoroscopic guidance. You directed a cardiac resuscitation better than any attending I've worked with in 30 years. Chen stepped closer. "I don't know who you are, but right now I don't care. I need you. You don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to help me save lives. Is that really so complicated?" The ambulance bay doors exploded inward. 4 Navy corpsmen burst through, pushing 2 gurneys at a dead sprint. The noise hit Claire like a physical force. Radio chatter, rotor wash still echoing off the concrete, shouted medical terminology that she understood in her bones because she had lived inside that language for 15 years. "Too urgent surgical," the lead corpsman shouted. He was a muscular black man with a combat medic patch on his sleeve and blood on his hands that wasn't his own. "Patient 1, gunshot wound upper right quadrant, entry and exit, significant hepatic involvement. Patient 2, blast fragmentation, suspected hemothorax, decreased breath sounds left side, needle decompression performed in flight but reaccumulated." Claire pressed herself against the wall, head down, ponytail over her face. "Stay invisible. Let them handle it. Walk away." But her eyes tracked the gurneys anyway. Training she couldn't unlearn, no matter how hard she tried. Patient 1 was a male in his late 20s, wearing the shredded remains of a desert camouflage uniform. His face was caked with dust and dried blood, but his patches were visible. Navy SEAL trident, the gold eagle and anchor and pistol that marked him as one of the most elite warriors on the planet. His abdomen was packed with combat gauze already soaking through. Patient 2 was younger, maybe 24. His chest was wrapped in gauze that was turning red faster than it should. His breathing was rapid, shallow, and getting worse. Trachea shifting to the right. Jugular veins bulging against his neck. Textbook tension pneumothorax rebuilding after the field decompression had failed. He had minutes, maybe less. "Get them on the tables," Chen commanded. "Prescott, where the hell is Prescott?" "Here." Prescott appeared from the hallway. He had changed into a fresh white coat. His hair was restyled. He looked like a man who had just spent 5 minutes in a bathroom mirror rebuilding the version of himself that Claire had demolished. "I'll take patient 2, Prescott announced. "Chest tube. Patel, set up the tray." Claire watched from her corner as Prescott approached the young SEAL's gurney. The kid's lips were turning blue. His oxygen saturation read 86 on the monitor and dropping. Every breath he fought for pushed less air into lungs that were being crushed by trapped blood and pressure. Prescott picked up a scalpel. He studied the chest wall like a man reading a textbook instead of a body. He palpated the ribs slowly, carefully, methodically. Too slowly. 84%. 82. "Fifth intercostal space," Prescott muttered to Patel. "Mid-axillary line. We'll use lidocaine for local anesthesia before—" "There's no time for lidocaine," Claire said from across the room. Every head turned. "His trachea is deviated 2 centimeters, Claire continued. Her voice was steady but urgent. "Mediastinal shift is already compressing the vena cava. You have maybe 90 seconds before his heart stops." "I know the anatomy, Donovan." Prescott didn't look up. "I don't need a nurse telling me." "Sats dropping," the monitoring nurse called out. 78%. Claire took a step forward. 76. Another step. Behind the corpsman, 3 more figures entered the trauma bay. These weren't medics. Claire recognized the walk before she saw their faces. The way they scanned corners, the way they positioned themselves with tactical awareness even in a hospital corridor. Civilian clothes, jeans, boots, jackets cut loose to hide sidearms, but their bearing screamed military. The tallest one stopped in the doorway. He was white, early 40s, with a red-brown beard and a sleeve of tattoos running from his wrists to where his pushed-up sleeves ended. His eyes swept the room the way a sniper scans a rooftop. They passed over the staff, the equipment, the patients, and then they found Claire. She looked away, too fast. A trained operator would catch that avoidance. He caught it. 74%, the monitoring nurse said. Doctor, I'm working on it, Prescott snapped. He made his incision, shallow, hesitant. The scalpel barely parted the skin. He was afraid. Claire could see it in the tremor of his wrist, the way he second-guessed every millimeter. The bearded SEAL stepped forward. Doc, that's Petty Officer Tyler Rawlings. He took shrapnel saving my life 30 minutes ago. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. I am doing it as fast as 72%. Claire couldn't watch anymore. She crossed the distance in 4 strides. Her compact frame moved with a speed and precision that made 2 nurses step backward instinctively. She didn't ask permission. She grabbed a Kelly clamp from the instrument tray with her left hand, placed her right hand flat against Prescott's shoulder, and pushed him sideways, hard enough that he stumbled into Patel. What the? Claire was already inside the incision. She spread the intercostal muscles with one motion, created a channel between the ribs, took the chest tube from the tray, and advanced it into the thoracic cavity with the fluid certainty of a woman who had done this in the back of moving helicopters, intense with no electricity, in buildings that were actively collapsing. A rushing hiss of air exploded from the tube. Trapped pressure released. The young SEAL gasped so hard his whole body arched off the gurney. His chest expanded. Both sides, equal, the way lungs are supposed to move. Claire sutured the tube in place. Fast, precise stitches. A modified Lambert pattern that she had developed herself during her 3rd deployment because standard sutures failed too often in field conditions. Sats climbing, the monitoring nurse said, her voice cracking. 78, 82, 88. Claire stepped back. Her hands were steady. Her face was blank, but her heart was slamming against her ribs because she had just done it again, exposed herself again, twice in 1 hour. She felt eyes on her. The bearded SEAL was staring directly at her, not with anger, not with confusion, with something far more dangerous, recognition. Oh my God, he breathed. Claire didn't react. Valkyrie. The word went through her like a bullet. That call sign, that name, she hadn't heard it spoken aloud in 14 months, and the sound of it cracked something inside her chest that she had spent every day since Hellman trying to hold together. I'm sorry, she said, her voice flat, controlled, rehearsed. I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm just a nurse. The SEAL took a step toward her. He was massive, 6'4" at least. His presence filled the room, but his expression wasn't threatening. It was something closer to awe, the kind of look a man gets when he sees someone he thought was dead. That suture pattern, he said. He pointed at the chest tube. That's a modified Lambert. I've seen one person in my life use that variation. One. He paused. You operated on me 6 years ago. Kandahar. IED hit our convoy, took out half my team. I had shrapnel in my chest and you were covered in blood, and you told me to stop being a baby because you'd had worse paper cuts. Claire's throat closed. That wasn't me, she said. Ma'am, I remember your face. I remember that scar above your eyebrow. And I remember that you operated for 14 hours straight in a sandstorm to save 3 of my guys when everyone else said they were already gone. His voice dropped. Lieutenant Colonel Stratton, call sign Valkyrie. You were a legend. The trauma bay went silent. Every nurse, every tech, every resident, they all stopped moving and stared at the mop lady who a SEAL team leader had just called a legend. They said you disappeared, the bearded SEAL continued. After Helmand, they said you just vanished. Nobody knew where you went. He looked at her scrubs, at her badge, at the mop water stain on her shoulder. Ma'am, what are you doing working as a nurse in Chicago? Before Claire could answer, A man in a navy dress uniform pushed through the crowd. He wore the eagles of a captain. His chest was layered with ribbons that told the story of a 30-year career. His face was tight with controlled terror. "Where's my son?" Captain Frank Rawlings demanded. "Where is Tyler?" The bearded SEAL straightened. "Captain Rawlings, sir. Tyler is stable. This woman saved his life." Rawlings looked at Claire, really looked at her. His eyes traveled from her auburn ponytail to her blood-soaked scrubs, to her scarred hands, to the thin scar above her left eyebrow. His face went white. "Dr. Stratton?" he whispered. Two recognitions. Two people who knew her real face. Claire felt the walls closing in. "I treated you too," she said quietly. There was no point in lying anymore. "Helmand Province, 2021. Gunshot wound to the abdomen. I remember because you wouldn't stop giving orders from the operating table." Rawlings let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You told me to shut up or you'd put me under yourself. And you still didn't shut up." Rawlings looked at the bearded SEAL, then at his son on the gurney, breathing freely, color returning to his face, then back at Claire. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Hiding," Claire said. The word came out like a confession. "She's not hiding anymore," Chen said from behind them. "She's standing in my trauma bay covered in blood with two patients alive who shouldn't be." Prescott stepped forward. His face was the color of old brick. "This is a fraud investigation. You do that, Doc, and I'll call JAG. Let's see whose phone call matters more." "Enough." Chen's voice cut through the room. "All of you, administrator's office, now." Claire looked at the door. She could still run. She had done it before. New city, new name, new hospital. She could disappear again and become nobody again, and mop floors again, and pretend that the woman she really was had never existed. But Tyler Rawlings was looking at her from the gurney. 24 years old, alive because she couldn't stay hidden. His eyes were glassy with pain medication but focused enough to find hers. "Thank you," he mouthed. Claire nodded once. Then she followed Chen toward the elevator. The administrator's office felt like an interrogation room. Claire sat in a leather chair with her blood-crusted hands folded in her lap. She hadn't been allowed to change. Evidence, they called her scrubs. Of what crime, nobody could say with certainty. Gerald Morrison, the hospital CEO, sat behind his oak desk looking like a man whose quarterly report had just caught fire. To his left, the hospital attorney, Patricia Valdez, tapped her pen against a legal pad with the mechanical precision of someone calculating liability. To his right, Prescott sat with his arms crossed and his jaw clenched so tight Claire could hear his teeth grinding. The bearded SEAL had identified himself as Master Chief Derek Holt. He stood against the wall with his arms folded and his eyes fixed on Prescott the way a wolf watches a rabbit. "Let me understand this," Morrison said. "You've been employed here for 6 months as a registered nurse, but you're actually a former lieutenant colonel in the United States Army Medical Corps, a trauma surgeon." "Former," Claire said. "But your medical license is still active," Valdez interjected. She had already checked. "Active in 4 states including Illinois, so technically you're a licensed physician working as a nurse. Unusual, but not illegal." "Not illegal?" Prescott leaned forward. "She performed 2 unauthorized invasive procedures. She physically assaulted me. She violated patient consent. She saved 2 lives," Holt said quietly. "How many did you save today, doctor?" Prescott's mouth snapped shut. The door opened. Chen entered carrying a tablet. "Eddie Vargas is out of surgery. Vascular repair successful. He's going to keep his leg." She looked at Claire. "His wife asked me to thank whoever stopped the bleeding." "That's wonderful," Morrison said, "but it doesn't change the—" "I'm not finished." Chen held up the tablet. "I pulled the security footage." She turned the screen toward the room. From the moment Claire clamped the femoral artery to the return of a viable pulse was 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Our vascular chief reviewed the footage. He said the technique she used, a blind clamp on a fully retracted vessel, has a 70% failure rate. She did it perfectly, on the first attempt, in a room where everyone else had already given up. Chen swiped to the next clip. Chest tube placement on Petty Officer Rawlings. His oxygen saturation was at 74%. Tracheal deviation was visible on camera. Prescott had been prepping for over 2 minutes without making a definitive incision. Claire placed the tube in 45 seconds. Silence. So here's what I'm saying, Chen continued. This woman saved 2 people today using skills that most trauma surgeons don't develop in an entire career. If we punish her for that, we deserve every lawsuit that follows. Prescott shot to his feet. She made me look incompetent in front of my staff. No, Chen said. You were incompetent. She just made it visible. Why? Morrison asked Claire. Why did you leave the military? Why would someone with your skills choose to mop floors? Claire was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. Helmand Province, 2023. I was running a forward surgical team in an area that was supposed to be cleared. It wasn't. Insurgents hit us while I was in the middle of a thoracotomy on a 19-year-old Marine. Rockets, small arms, everything at once. She paused. I finished the surgery, saved the kid. But while I was operating on him, 3 more wounded came in. I couldn't get to them. They bled out on stretchers 20 feet away from me while I had my hands inside someone else's chest. That's triage, Holt said gently. You can't save everyone. I know that. Knowing doesn't change the sound they made. Claire looked at her hands. One of them called for his mother. He was 20 years old, and he called for his mother, and I couldn't go to him because I was keeping someone else alive. I heard him stop calling. I heard the exact moment he stopped. Nobody spoke. So I left. I thought if I could just be invisible, if I could just be nobody, I wouldn't have to make those choices anymore. I wouldn't have to decide who lives and who dies. But you can't stop, can you? Chen said softly. No. Claire's voice cracked for the first time. Apparently I can't. Captain Rawlings opened the door. My son is awake. He's asking who saved him. He looked at Claire. He wants to thank you. Valdez tapped her pen. Legally, this is complicated. If we acknowledge she's a physician, there are liability questions. If we fire her, those patients' families will claim we terminated the person who saved their loved ones. And if we keep her mopping floors, Chen said, we're the hospital that made a war hero clean vomit. Morrison made his decision. Here's what happens. Internal review, officially. Unofficially, Dr. Chen is going to recommend we bring you on as attending trauma surgeon. Full credentials, full privileges. And Prescott? Claire asked. Dr. Prescott is transferring to radiology, Morrison said. Effective immediately. Prescott went pale. You can't sign the transfer, Valdez said, sliding a document across the desk. Or we audit every case you've touched in the last 12 months. Prescott signed. He left the room without looking at anyone. Holt chuckled. That's what we call getting smoked. Claire didn't smile. She was listening to something nobody else could hear, a sound from 14 months ago. A young soldier calling for his mother in a tent in Helmand Province. She stood up. I want to see the other patient, Staff Sergeant Torres, the GSW. You're not assigned to. He's a combat casualty. That makes him mine. Chen nodded slowly. Welcome back to medicine, Dr. Stratton. Claire walked toward the door. Captain Rawlings stopped her. The reason we were in that helicopter, it was a training exercise that went wrong. Torres took a round meant for me. The local trauma center couldn't handle it. We diverted here as a last resort. He met her eyes. You were supposed to be hidden. We were supposed to be in Virginia. What are the odds we ended up in the same hospital? I don't believe in coincidence, Claire said. Neither did I, Rawlings replied. Until today. Claire left the office and walked toward the ICU. Staff members stopped what they were doing and stared as she passed. She could feel the whispers trailing behind her like smoke. The mop lady. The nurse who wasn't a nurse. The woman who broke open a dying man's leg and brought him back. She didn't hunch her shoulders. She didn't lower her eyes. For the first time in 14 months, Claire Donovan walked through Ridgewood General Hospital like the woman she actually was. And she hated every second of it, because being visible meant being findable. And there were people in the world who had spent a great deal of money making sure that Lieutenant Colonel Emma Claire Stratton stayed lost. Her burner phone buzzed in her pocket, the phone that only 3 people on Earth had the number for. Claire stopped walking. She pulled the phone out, blocked number. She stepped into an empty supply closet and pressed the phone to her ear. Valkyrie, the voice was gravel in authority. General Thomas Caldwell, her former commanding officer, the man who had signed her discharge papers and told her to disappear. That's not my name anymore, sir. Your face is on CNN, Claire. Mystery nurse performs battlefield surgery in Chicago hospital. I was eating lunch when I recognized you on the screen. Do you understand what you've done? I saved 2 lives. You blew your cover. We spent months burying your identity after Helmand, your records, your service file, everything. We made you a ghost, and you just went on national television. I didn't go on television. Someone had a phone. I was saving a man who was bleeding to death. It doesn't matter why. It matters that they know. Caldwell's voice dropped low. Listen to me carefully. The Department of Justice reopened the Helmand case yesterday. New financial evidence. They're going after the Greystone defense executives for war crimes, and you are the star witness. Claire's hand went numb. Greystone Defense. The name hit her like a fist. She hadn't spoken it in 14 months, but she heard it every night in her dreams. The orphanage in Helmand. 37 children. Dead. Not from insurgent fire, from American contractors who opened fire on a civilian building to destroy evidence of an arms deal that went sideways. Claire had been the first surgeon on site. She had tried to save them. She had counted the bodies. She had testified at the classified tribunal that ended 3 military careers and cost Greystone its billion-dollar Pentagon contract. But the executives walked. Every single one of them. They kept their money and their mansions and their freedom while 37 children rotted in the ground. Sir, I told the JAG lawyers I was finished. You don't get to be finished, not now. I'm out. I left the military. I left that life. Claire, Caldwell stopped. She heard another voice in the background. Urgent. Then Caldwell came back on the line, and everything in his tone had changed. Where are you right now? Exactly. Ridgewood General, 4th floor. Why? Get out, right now. Don't go to your apartment. Don't go anywhere predictable. I'm sending a security team, but they're 40 minutes out. Sir, what's happening? Greystone knows you surfaced. We intercepted communications 20 minutes ago. They're sending a team to your location. Professional, 6 to 10 operators. They're going to make it look like a random act of violence. Disgruntled patient, workplace shooting, something plausible. Claire stopped breathing. They're going to kill you, Claire, and they'll kill anyone near you to make the story clean. The line went dead. Claire stood in the supply closet holding a phone that suddenly weighed 100 pounds. Her heart rate spiked to 140. Then she did what 15 years of combat medicine had trained her to do. She slowed her breathing. She dropped her heart rate. She thought. She had maybe 10 minutes before professional killers walked through the front door of this hospital disguised as people who belonged here. Paramedics, maintenance workers, visitors. They would cut the power first, then communications. Then they would move floor by floor until they found her. And everyone between them and Claire Donovan would become collateral damage. She shoved the phone in her pocket and opened the supply closet door. The ICU corridor looked normal. Nurses at stations, a janitor mopping, monitors beeping their steady rhythms. Claire walked fast toward Torres's room. Master Chief Holt and another SEAL named Nash were standing by the window. Torres lay unconscious, ventilator breathing for him, monitors painting his fragile vitals in green light. "We have a problem," Claire said. Holt turned from the window. His expression told her he already knew something was wrong. "3 white vans just pulled into the emergency entrance," he said. "Men getting out, EMT uniforms. But they're moving wrong, too tactical, diamond formation, hand signals." Claire joined him at the window. She saw them. 8 men, maybe more. They moved across the parking lot with the synchronized precision of a unit that had rehearsed this operation. No wasted movement, no hesitation, weapons concealed but accessible. "Greystone Defense," Claire said. "They're here for me." "Why?" Nash asked. "Because I'm the only witness who can put their executives in prison for murdering 37 children. And the Justice Department just reopened the case." Holt's hand moved to his concealed Glock. "How many?" "First wave, 8 to 10. Cleanup team behind them. Maybe 6 more. Rules of engagement? They'll kill everyone on this floor to bury me and make it look like a mass casualty event. Gas leak, structural collapse, something the news can explain in a headline." Holt pulled the Glock free. He checked the magazine, racked the slide. "Nash, secure the door. Nobody in or out without my authorization." Nash moved. Fast. Silent. The way SEALs move when the switch flips from peacetime to war. Holt looked at Claire. "You armed?" "I'm a nurse." He reached down to his ankle holster and pulled a compact pistol. Held it out to her. "Not anymore, you're not." Claire took the weapon, checked the chamber, verified the magazine. 14 rounds plus 1. The motions were automatic. Muscle memory from a life she had tried to bury. She looked at Torres on the ventilator, at the monitors keeping his fragile hold on life visible, at the IV lines and blood bags that were the only things between him and death. "We can't move him," she said. "Then we hold this room," Holt replied. The lights went out. Every light, every monitor, every computer screen. The entire floor plunged into darkness. Only the red glow of the emergency exit signs remained. Torres's ventilator switched to battery backup with a soft click that sounded like a countdown starting. Somewhere below them, the killers were already inside the building. And Claire Stratton, the woman who spent 14 months trying to be invisible, was the only thing standing between them and a floor full of people who had no idea what was coming. Claire counted to 3 in the darkness. Then she moved. "Ruth!" She grabbed the charge nurse by the arm. Ruth was frozen at the nurse's station, her hands still reaching for a phone that no longer worked. "Listen to me. Lock every patient room on this floor. Fire doors sealed. Nobody opens for anyone unless they hear my voice or see proper security ID. Do it now." "Claire, what's happening? The power—" "It's not a malfunction. Someone cut it. There are armed men in this building, and they're coming up. Get the staff into rooms. Get them away from the corridors. Go." Ruth's eyes went wide, but she didn't argue. 30 years of nursing had taught her to recognize the difference between panic and certainty. Claire's voice held zero panic. Ruth turned and started moving staff. Claire ran back to Torres's room. Holt was at the door, Glock drawn, body pressed against the wall in a tactical position so natural it looked like breathing. Nash had flipped Torres's bed so the heavy steel frame faced the window, creating a barrier between the patient and whatever was coming. "Stairwells?" Holt asked without looking at her. 2 access points, east and west, both open to every floor. Elevators are dead with the power out, so they'll use stairs. How long on battery backup for his vent? Claire checked the display. Green light. 28 minutes. That's our clock then. That's not all. Claire pointed at the IV pump running Torres's blood transfusion. He needs continuous transfusion for the next 2 hours minimum. If that pump dies, or if someone bumps those lines, he bleeds out internally from the hepatic repair. So we babysit a critical patient while fighting off a kill squad. Nash shook his head. Outstanding. I'm going out there, Claire said. Holt turned. Say that again. They're here for me, not for Torres, not for the patients. Me. If I stay in this room, they converge here. If I go out there, I draw them away. They commit their operators to chasing me, and you hold this room with fewer threats. You're a surgeon, and you're a SEAL with one magazine and a wounded teammate who can't be moved. We don't have the ammunition to hold a defensive position against 10 trained operators. The only play is to split their focus. Holt stared at her for 3 seconds. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a second magazine. 14 rounds. That's all I've got to spare. Claire took it. It's enough. No, it's not. It's what I have. She press-checked the Glock. Round in the chamber. Safety off. Keep Torres alive. That's your mission. What's yours? Claire looked at the door. Same as Hellman. Same as always. Nobody else dies tonight. She moved into the corridor. The darkness was total except for the red glow of exit signs, painting everything in blood-colored light. Water dripped somewhere. A patient's monitor beeped on battery power behind a closed door. Claire's rubber-soled shoes were silent on the linoleum. She moved the way she'd been trained, low center of gravity, weapon up, checking corners before committing. She made it 20 feet before she heard them. Boots on stairs, controlled, measured, 2 sets. They were coming up the east stairwell, moving in a standard 2-man clearing pattern. 1 high, 1 low. They'd open the door, pie the corners, and move down the corridor room by room. Claire had maybe 30 seconds. She grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall mount, pulled the pin, set it on the floor directly in front of the stairwell door. Then she backed up 15 feet and pressed herself flat against the wall. The stairwell door opened. Slow. Professional. A hand appeared first, holding a suppressed submachine gun. Then a head, covered in a black balaclava, night vision goggles pushed up on the forehead because the emergency exit signs gave enough ambient light. His boot hit the fire extinguisher. He looked down. 1 second of distraction. Claire fired twice. The first round took him in the shoulder above his vest. He spun. The second hit the door frame as he fell back into the stairwell. His partner opened fire immediately, suppressed rounds coughing past Claire's position, chewing plaster off the wall inches from her head. She was already moving, sprinting down the corridor, counting doors. She ducked into an empty patient room and flattened herself behind the door. Boots in the hallway. Running. The wounded contractor's partner was pursuing, angry now, moving faster than he should. Claire could hear his breathing through the wall. Heavy. Adrenalized. He passed her door. Claire stepped out behind him and swung the Glock across the base of his skull. He went down hard. His weapon clattered across the floor. She kicked it away and zip-tied his wrist with a restraint from the supply cabinet. Then she took his MP5, checked the magazine, 22 rounds, and slung it over her shoulder. 2 down, 6 to 8 remaining. Her hands were rock steady. Her pulse was elevated but controlled. The surgeon in her was gone. Something older had taken over. Something she'd spent 14 months trying to drown in mop water and anonymity. The soldier. The operator. The woman they called Valkyrie because she walked through death and chose who survived. She moved toward the west stairwell. If they were smart, they'd send a team up both sides simultaneously. She needed to cut off the second approach before they established a foothold on the floor. Halfway down the corridor, she heard a voice. Small. Terrified. Hello? Is someone there? Please, the lights went out and my IV is beeping and I can't find the call button. Room 418. Claire checked the door. An elderly woman, mid-70s, alone in bed, her eyes wide in the darkness. Heart monitor on battery. IV pump alarming because the power loss had disrupted the infusion cycle. Claire silenced the pump with 3 button presses. Ma'am, I need you to stay in this bed. Don't move. Don't make any noise. Can you do that for me? What's happening, dear? A bad situation, but I'm going to handle it. You stay quiet. Are you a nurse? Claire looked at the MP5 hanging from her shoulder, at the Glock in her waistband, at her blood-soaked scrubs. Something like that, she said. Stay down. She locked the door from inside and slipped back into the corridor. The elderly woman's voice followed her out. Be careful, dear. 8 minutes since the power went out. The contractors had expected a quick, surgical operation. Find the target, eliminate witnesses, plant evidence of a catastrophic event, and disappear. But Claire had already taken 2 of their men off the board, and they still hadn't located her. They'd be adapting now, regrouping, probably pulling back to reassess. Professional operators didn't keep pushing a plan that was failing. They adjusted, which meant the next move would be different, more aggressive, less surgical. Claire reached the west stairwell. She pressed her ear against the door. Nothing. She opened it a crack. A bullet punched through the gap and buried itself in the wall behind her. She slammed the door shut and dropped flat. They were already in position, waiting for her. Target at west stairwell, 4th floor, a voice barked from the other side. Converge, converge. Claire ran. Behind her, the stairwell door flew open and 2 contractors poured through. Suppressed fire tore down the corridor. Rounds shattered a window, punctured a supply cart, ripped through the drywall inches above her head as she dove around a corner. She was pinned, 2 behind her advancing fast. Unknown number ahead. The corridor branched in a T-junction. Left led back toward Torres's room. Right led toward the operating suites. She went right, because going left would lead them straight to Holt, Nash, and a man on a ventilator who couldn't survive a firefight. The operating suites were dark and empty. Claire pushed through the double doors and ran through pre-op, past the scrub sinks, into operating room 2. She knew this room. She had restocked it 100 times. She knew where every piece of equipment sat, every drawer, every cabinet. She grabbed a canister of sevoflurane from the anesthesia cart. Volatile anesthetic, flammable in high concentrations. Then she turned on the oxygen supply line to the room and cracked the valve wide open. Pure O2 flooded the space silently. She set the sevoflurane canister on the floor near the door, slightly open, letting the vapor mix with the oxygen-enriched air. Then she moved to the far side of the room and crouched behind the operating table. The doors banged open 12 seconds later. 2 contractors came through in a combat crouch, weapons sweeping. Night vision now, green-tinted goggles over their eyes. Room clear left. Sweeping right. Claire fired 1 round from the MP5 into the sevoflurane canister. The spark ignited the oxygen-rich, anesthetic-saturated air. The flash was blinding and violent. Not an explosion exactly, but a concussive fireball that blew both men backward through the doors. Their night vision amplified the flash 1,000-fold. They screamed, clawing at their goggles, temporarily blind and disoriented. Claire had closed her eyes and covered her face. She came up from behind the table and moved through the smoke. 2 precise shots. Both contractors stopped moving. She took a fresh magazine from one of their tactical vests. 30 rounds. She was properly armed now. 4 down. Maybe 6 remaining. Maybe more. The sprinkler system activated. Water rained down from the ceiling, soaking the corridors, turning the floor into a slick hazard. Claire pushed through it, her auburn ponytail plastered to her neck, her scrubs heavy and dripping. She heard gunfire from Torres's room, short, controlled bursts, Holt's Glock, then the deeper cough of an MP5, Nash engaging. They were hitting the room from the outside, rappelling down from the roof, or coming through the windows. Claire changed direction and sprinted toward the ICU. She turned a corner and ran directly into Dr. Chen. Chen was pressed against the wall, a flashlight in one hand, her face ghost white. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead where flying debris had struck her. Claire, what is happening? There are men with guns. I heard explosions. There are patients on this floor who... Sarah, look at me. Claire grabbed her by the shoulders. I need you to do exactly what I say. Go to room 418. There's an elderly patient alone. Lock yourself in with her and do not open that door. Who are these people? They're here because of something I witnessed 2 years ago. Something I testified about. They want me dead, and they don't care who else goes down. Oh my God. Sarah, Claire's voice was iron. I'm going to stop them, but I need you safe so that when this is over, there's a surgeon left to take care of the patients. You understand? You're the backup plan. Go. Chen looked at the MP5 in Claire's hands, at the tactical vest she'd stripped from a contractor, at the woman she had known for 6 months as a quiet, invisible float pool nurse who was now moving through a combat zone like she'd been born in one. Who the hell are you? Chen whispered. Right now, I'm the thing standing between these people and everyone on this floor. Go. Now. Chen went. Claire reached Torres's room at a dead run. The door was open. Glass from the shattered window covered the floor. Holt was behind the flipped bed, firing at a figure on the window ledge. Nash was down. Not dead, Claire could see his chest moving, but his left arm hung at a wrong angle, and blood soaked his sleeve from shoulder to wrist. Broken humerus at minimum. Brachial artery involvement possible. Nash is hit, Holt shouted. He took a round through the bicep. I've got a tourniquet on it, but he needs... I see it. Claire slid across the wet floor to Nash's side. She tore his sleeve open. Entry wound, lateral bicep. Exit wound, medial. The brachial artery was intact. She could feel the distal pulse at his wrist, but the bleeding was significant. She tightened the tourniquet one more rotation, and Nash groaned through clenched teeth. How bad? Nash asked. You'll live. Stop talking. A contractor appeared at the window. Claire grabbed the MP5 and fired a 3-round burst without looking up from Nash's arm. The contractor fell backward off the ledge. She heard him hit something 2 floors below. How many left? She asked Holt. I count 3 outside. They pulled back after Nash went down. They're regrouping. They're running out of men. So are we. Holt jerked his head toward Nash. I'm down to my last 5 rounds. Claire handed him the MP5 with 26 rounds remaining. Use them wisely. Where are you going? To finish this. Claire, they have a command vehicle in the parking lot. 3rd white van. Somebody's coordinating this operation from inside it. Communications, tactical feeds, assault plan. I take out that vehicle, they lose coordination. The remaining operators become individuals instead of a team. You're going to assault a fortified position alone. I'm going to walk down 4 flights of stairs and shoot whoever's sitting in that van. It's not complicated. It's suicide. It wasn't suicide in Kandahar. It wasn't suicide in Helmand. It's just Tuesday, Chief. Holt almost smiled. Almost. You're the craziest doctor I've ever met. Hold this room. Keep Torres alive. Keep Nash from bleeding. She looked at Torres on the ventilator. Still unconscious. Still breathing. The battery display read 16 minutes. 16 minutes on the vent battery. If I'm not back by then, you've got a bigger problem than the guys with guns. She moved to the door. Valkyrie, Holt called. She stopped. Give 'em hell. Claire hit the east stairwell at speed. She'd cleared it earlier, and the 2 men she'd neutralized were still down. She took a spare magazine from the conscious one, who flinched when she knelt beside him. Please, he said, I'm just a contractor. I was hired for a security job. They didn't tell us. Shut up. Claire took his radio earpiece and put it in her own ear. Immediately, she could hear the tactical frequency. Chatter. Panic now. The confidence was gone from their voices. Alpha Team, status. Alpha Team, report. Bravo 2 is down. Bravo 1 is non-responsive. We've lost 4 operators. Who the hell is this woman? Intel said she was a nurse. She's not a goddamn nurse. She just blew up an operating room. Claire smiled grimly and kept moving. Third floor, second floor. She paused at the ground-level door. Through the radio, she could hear the command element in the van issuing orders. All units fall back to rally point. We're switching to Plan B. Bring the thermite charges online. Two white vans, empty, doors open. The third van sat at the far end with its rear doors cracked. A faint glow from inside. Monitors, radios, the brain of the entire operation. Two contractors stood guard outside the van. They were watching the hospital entrance, not the ambulance bay. Claire had maybe 50 feet of open ground to cover. She fired 3 rounds through the glass doors, shattering them. The alarm added to the chaos. The guards spun toward the sound, weapons up. Claire came through the broken glass at a sprint. She fired on the move, not aiming to kill, aiming to suppress. Rounds sparked off the van's armored panels. The guards dove behind a concrete barrier. 30 feet, 20. One guard popped up and fired. A round tugged at Claire's scrub top near the hip. So close, she felt the heat. She dropped into a slide on the wet pavement, her compact body skidding across the asphalt like a runner stealing home. She came up at the van's rear bumper. A man inside the van was turning, pistol rising. Claire was faster. One shot. He dropped. She vaulted into the van. Monitors everywhere. Surveillance feeds showing hospital corridors. A tactical map with assault positions marked. Radios crackling with confused chatter from the remaining contractors. And in the front passenger seat, a man in his 50s in a tailored charcoal suit. He turned to look at her with a calm expression of someone who had never been surprised by violence, because he had always been the one ordering it. "Dr. Stratton," he said, as though greeting her at a cocktail party, "I had hoped we could handle this more quietly." "Marcus Greystone." Claire kept the weapon trained on his chest. "You came personally." "Some things require personal attention," he smiled without warmth. "You cost my company $3 billion with your testimony. You destroyed careers, reputations, a legacy I spent 30 years building. You murdered 37 children. I ran a defense company. Operational decisions were made by field personnel. I was there." Claire's voice dropped to something quiet and terrible. "I held those children. I tried to put them back together. A 6-year-old girl with half her face gone. A baby who was still warm when I found him. Your field personnel did that, and you signed the checks." Greystone's smile didn't waver. "And now the Justice Department thinks they can prove it. Because of you." He reached slowly into his jacket. "Don't." He pulled out a phone, showed her the screen. A countdown timer, 41 seconds. "Thermite charges," he said, "planted on the east wing structural supports while your power was out. When that timer reaches 0, 4 floors collapse. Patients, nurses, your SEAL friends, that young man on the ventilator. All of them. 38 seconds. You can shoot me, but you can't stop the timer. The detonation signal is already transmitted. The only way to abort is a voice command from me through this device." He held up a small radio transmitter. "So here's my offer. You walk away. You disappear again. You refuse to testify, and I stop the countdown. 32 seconds. Or you pull that trigger, and 160 people die, including you." Claire's finger rested on the trigger. She thought about Eddie Vargas, alive because she couldn't stay invisible. About Tyler Rawlings, breathing because she couldn't watch a young man die. About Torres on a ventilator with 16 minutes of battery and a SEAL team defending him. About the elderly woman in room 418 who called her dear. About Chen, hiding with that woman, trusting Claire to end this. 25 seconds. She thought about the children in Helmand, about the 6-year-old girl whose name she never learned, about justice that had waited 2 years and couldn't wait anymore. 20 seconds. "You think I won't shoot you," Claire said. "I think you're a doctor. Saving lives is what you do." "You're right." Claire lowered the weapon 2 inches. Then she fired into his right kneecap. Greystone screamed. The sound was raw and animal, and nothing like the composed executive he'd been 3 seconds earlier. He doubled forward, grabbing his shattered knee, the radio transmitter slipping from his fingers. Claire caught it before it hit the floor. 15 seconds. "Abort code," she said. "Now, or I do the other knee." "You can't, I'm a combat surgeon, Mr. Greystone. I know exactly how much pain a human body can endure before it shuts down. And I know exactly how to keep you conscious through all of it. I've done it to enemy combatants who were actively trying to kill me. You're sitting in a chair. This will be easy." She pressed the barrel against his left kneecap. 12 seconds. "Code red, abort!" Greystone screamed into the transmitter. "Code red, abort! Abort! Abort!" The timer stopped. 9 seconds remaining. Claire stood over Marcus Greystone in his $3,000 suit, now curled in the fetal position, with blood pouring from his knee and tears cutting tracks through the composed mask he'd worn for decades. She picked up his phone. She picked up the transmitter. She took his pistol from his shoulder holster and tossed it out the van door. Then she heard sirens, real ones, getting louder, converging from every direction. Blue and red lights swept across the parking lot, FBI tactical vehicles, Chicago PD, and a black SUV with government plates that screeched to a stop 20 feet from the van. General Thomas Caldwell stepped out. He looked at the shattered glass doors, at the bodies of contractors on the pavement, at Claire standing in the back of a surveillance van, soaking wet, covered in blood, holding a weapon over a screaming billionaire. "Jesus Christ, Claire," Caldwell breathed. "What did you do?" "Kept my patients alive," she said. "You're late." "I see that. The East Wing has thermite charges on the structural supports. He aborted the detonation, but the charges are still live. You need an EOD team up there now." Caldwell barked orders. Agents swarmed. Claire handed over the weapons, raised her hands for the tactical team, and identified herself clearly and calmly, while Marcus Greystone sobbed on the floor of his own command vehicle. She stepped out of the van. The rain had stopped. The parking lot was chaos of flashing lights and shouted commands and the organized violence of federal law enforcement doing what federal law enforcement does when they arrive 4 minutes after a 45-year-old woman in nurse's scrubs has already won the war. Claire's legs gave out at the ambulance bay entrance. She went down on both knees on the wet concrete. The adrenaline was draining out of her body like water from a cracked vessel, and everything she had done in the last 20 minutes hit her at once. The men she had shot, the fire she had started, the sound of Greystone screaming, the 9 seconds on that timer that separated 160 people from death. Holt appeared from inside the hospital, pushing Torres on a gurney with one hand, supporting Nash with the other. Both SEALs were bloodied. Both were alive. "It's done," Claire said from the ground. Holt looked at the parking lot, at the federal agents, at Greystone being dragged from the van in handcuffs. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." "Torres?" "Stable, vent held. He never knew anything happened." Claire nodded. Then she leaned over and threw up on the pavement, her body's final rebellion against the violence she had waded through. Chen appeared with a wheelchair. "Sit down before you collapse." Claire sat. Her hands were shaking now, not the steady surgeon's hands, not the soldier's hands, just the hands of a 45-year-old woman who had spent 14 months trying to disappear and had just become the most visible person in America. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I know," Chen said. "I just wanted to mop floors and be nobody." "I know." Chen knelt beside her. "But Claire, you were never nobody. You were just pretending. And tonight you stopped pretending." Claire looked at her shaking hands. Surgeon's hands, soldier's hands, killer's hands, savior's hands. All the same hands, all the same woman. Caldwell approached, phone to his ear. He hung up and crouched beside her wheelchair. "Greystone is talking. Full confession in exchange for protective custody. He's giving up the entire network, financial records, co-conspirators, offshore accounts, everything. The Justice Department says your testimony is now the centerpiece of the biggest war crimes prosecution since Nuremberg. I don't want to testify, Claire said. I know. I'll do it anyway. Caldwell nodded slowly. I know that too. From inside the hospital, carried on the night air through broken windows and shattered glass, Claire heard a sound, faint, barely there. A patient's monitor beeping steadily, a ventilator cycling. The ordinary sounds of a hospital doing what hospitals do, keeping people alive through the dark hours until morning comes. She had saved that sound tonight. Every beep, every breath, every heartbeat on every floor of a building that should have been rubble. Claire Stratton sat in a wheelchair in a ruined parking lot, soaking wet, covered in blood that belonged to 6 different people, and listened to a hospital breathe. The FBI took 4 hours to clear the building. 4 hours of bomb technicians crawling through elevator shafts and stairwells, locating thermite charges on structural columns that would have pancaked the East Wing into a pile of concrete and bodies. 4 hours of agents photographing dead contractors, collecting shell casings, mapping blood splatter patterns that told the story of one woman's war against a private army. 4 hours in which Claire Stratton sat in a borrowed wheelchair in the ambulance bay, refusing to leave, refusing to sleep, refusing to let anyone treat the graze wound on her hip that she hadn't even noticed until Chen pointed out the blood soaking through her scrub pants. It's superficial, Claire said when Chen tried to examine it. You have a bullet wound. I've had worse. That's not the reassuring statement you think it is. Claire watched the FBI teams move in and out of the hospital. She counted them, tracked their patterns, old habits. The kind of habits that kept you alive in places where the wrong person walking through a door could end you. At 2:47 a.m., General Caldwell sat down on the concrete beside her wheelchair. He looked 10 years older than he had 6 hours ago. His uniform was rumpled. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since he arrived, and he'd finally turned it off and shoved it in his pocket. Greystone hasn't stopped talking, Caldwell said. His lawyers are trying to shut him up, but he's terrified. Apparently, getting shot in the kneecap by a woman in nurse's scrubs has a way of clarifying a man's priorities. What's he giving up? Everything. Shell companies in the Caymans that funneled money to field operators. Communication logs between Greystone executives and the team leaders who ordered the strike on the orphanage. Financial records showing payments to Afghan officials who helped cover up the aftermath. Caldwell paused. And names. He's naming everyone involved, all the way up to a sitting member of the Senate Armed Services Committee who approved the original contract. Claire closed her eyes. Senator Whitfield. You knew? I suspected. When I testified at the tribunal, certain questions were never asked. Certain documents were never subpoenaed. Someone above the JAG lawyers was controlling the scope of the investigation. Whitfield chaired the committee that approved Greystone's contract extension 3 months after the orphanage. Christ, Claire. It was never just about contractors, sir. It was about the system that created them, funded them, and looked the other way when they murdered children. Caldwell rubbed his face with both hands. The Justice Department prosecutor wants to meet with you at 0800, full deposition. They're building a RICO case on top of the war crimes charges. Greystone, his board of directors, the field commanders, and now potentially a United States senator. And I'm the linchpin. You're the only surviving witness who was physically present at the orphanage and can connect the financial trail to the bodies on the ground. Without you, they have documents. With you, they have a story. And stories are what juries remember. Claire opened her eyes. The parking lot was quieter now. Most of the emergency vehicles had gone. A few FBI sedans remained. Crime scene tape fluttered in the early morning wind. I need to check on my patients, she said. Claire, you've been through. Torres is 12 hours post-op from a hepatic repair. His liver could rebleed at any time. Tyler Rawlings had a chest tube placed under combat conditions that needs to be verified on imaging. Eddie Vargas should be out of vascular surgery by now, and someone needs to check his distal pulses. She gripped the wheelchair arms and pushed herself to standing. Her legs shook, but held. I need to check on my patients. Caldwell didn't argue. He'd served with her long enough to know that Claire Stratton on a mission was an immovable force. She walked back into the hospital at 3:15 a.m. The power had been restored an hour earlier. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and white after hours of darkness. Staff members lined the corridors. Some of them had been hiding in locked rooms during the attack. Some had heard gunfire and explosions and spent the worst hours of their lives not knowing if they would survive. They stared at Claire as she passed, not with the dismissive indifference she'd grown accustomed to over 14 months, with something else entirely. Fear mixed with awe, confusion laced with gratitude. This young woman who reminded her of every young nurse and young soldier she'd ever known. Bright-eyed, idealistic, unprepared for the ugliness that the world could deliver without warning. I did what I had to do, Claire said quietly. Are you okay? I was in room 412 with Mrs. Henderson. We heard shooting. She held my hand the whole time and told me to pray. Jessica's voice cracked. I thought we were going to die. You didn't. Because of you, Claire put a hand on Jessica's shoulder. You stayed with your patient. You held her hand when she was scared. That took courage too. Don't forget that. Jessica nodded, tears running down her face. Claire moved past her and kept walking. Torres was stable. Claire reviewed his labs, checked his drainage output, palpated his abdomen. The hepatic repair was holding. His blood pressure was stronger than it had been 6 hours ago. Holt sat in the corner of the room, still armed, still alert. He hadn't moved. You should sleep, Claire told him. So should you. I'm a doctor, we don't sleep. You're also a woman who just fought a private army. Doctors aren't supposed to do that either. Claire checked Torres's IV lines, adjusted his fluid rate, made notes on his chart with the automatic precision of someone who had managed combat casualties for 15 years. He's going to make it, she said. Holt exhaled. It was the first time she'd seen him release tension since the helicopters landed. His wife called. She's flying in from Virginia Beach. Gets here at 6. Good. He'll want to see her when he wakes up. She doesn't know what happened, not the real version, just that there was an incident at the hospital and he's stable. Keep it that way for now. She doesn't need to hear about thermite charges and kill squads. Not yet. Claire moved to Tyler Rawlings's room. The young SEAL was awake. Propped up in bed with his chest tube draining normally and his oxygen saturation holding at 96%. His father, Captain Rawlings, sat beside him in civilian clothes, one hand resting on his son's arm, as though physical contact could prevent anything bad from ever happening again. Tyler's eyes found Claire the moment she walked in. There she is, he said. His voice was rough from the chest tube but steady. Dad told me everything. About Helmand, about who you really are. Don't believe everything your father tells you. He said you told him to shut up on the operating table. That part's true. Tyler laughed and immediately winced, grabbing his ribs. Don't make me laugh, everything hurts. Claire checked his chest tube output. Clear serous fluid, no blood. Good. She listened to his lungs with a stethoscope she'd taken from the nurse's station. Equal breath sounds bilaterally. The lung had fully re-expanded. You're healing well, she said. Tube comes out in 24 to 48 hours if this trend continues. Ma'am, can I ask you something? You don't have to call me ma'am. I'm not in the military anymore. Can I ask you something, Doc? Claire sat on the edge of his bed. Go ahead. When you put that tube in my chest, when everything was going dark and I couldn't breathe, I heard you say something. You said, not today. I thought I dreamed it, but Dad said you say it to all your patients. I say it to the ones who need to hear it. What does it mean? Claire looked at this young man, 24 years old, the same age as the Marine who died in Helmand because she couldn't get to him in time. The one who called for his mother. The one whose voice she heard every night before she fell asleep and every morning before she opened her eyes. It means I decide, Claire said. Not the wound, not the bullet, not the shrapnel, me. I decide who lives and who dies, and I decided it wasn't your day. Tyler's eyes glistened. Captain Rawlings looked away, jaw tight. Thank you, Tyler said, for deciding. Claire squeezed his hand once and stood up. Get some rest, petty officer. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. Doc. Tyler, call me Claire. She left his room and almost walked into Nash, who was leaning against the wall with his left arm in a sling and his right hand holding a cup of vending machine coffee. Distal pulse? Claire asked, looking at his sling. Strong. The ortho consult said I need surgery, but it can wait until morning. Clean fracture. No neurovascular compromise. He grinned. Your tourniquet probably saved the arm. 3 more minutes without it, and we'd be talking about a different outcome. Don't thank me, thank the tourniquet. I'll thank whoever I want, Doc. Nash took a sip of his coffee. Holt told me what you did out there. The parking lot, Greystone, the timer. It sounds more dramatic than it was. You shot a billionaire in the knee. He was trying to collapse a building full of people. Still, you shot a billionaire in the knee. That's going to be a hell of a headline. Claire almost smiled. Almost. Is there more coffee in that machine? I got the last cup, but I'll share if you ask nicely. I don't ask nicely. I'm a combat surgeon. Nash handed her the coffee. She drank half of it in one gulp. It was terrible, watery and bitter, and exactly what she needed. At 5:30 a.m., Claire was reviewing Eddie Vargas's post-operative notes when a woman appeared in the ICU doorway. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a coat thrown over pajamas, the uniform of a wife who got a phone call in the middle of the night. 2 children clung to her legs, a boy maybe 7 and a girl maybe 5, both in pajamas with coats over them, both with wide, terrified eyes. I'm looking for Eddie Vargas, the woman said. Her voice was controlled but barely. They said he's here. They said someone saved him. Claire stepped forward. Mrs. Vargas? Maria. The woman's eyes swept over Claire, the borrowed scrubs, the bandage on her hip, the blood still under her fingernails that she hadn't been able to scrub away completely. Are you his doctor? I helped stabilize him in the emergency department. He's out of surgery now. The vascular repair was successful. He's going to keep his leg, and he's going to recover. Maria Vargas's composure shattered. She covered her mouth with both hands and sobbed. The little girl started crying because her mother was crying. The boy stood rigid, trying to be brave, his chin trembling. Claire knelt down to the boy's level. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus, your dad is a tough man. I saw him fight tonight and he didn't give up. He's sleeping right now, but when he wakes up, he's going to want to see you. Can you be strong for your mom until then? Marcus nodded. His chin stopped trembling. Claire stood and took Maria's hand. Come with me. I'll take you to him. She led the family to Eddie's room. He was sedated, monitors beeping steadily, his repaired leg elevated and wrapped. Maria sank into the chair beside his bed and took his hand. The little girl climbed into her mother's lap. Marcus stood beside the bed and placed his small hand on his father's arm. Claire watched from the doorway. This was why. This moment. This family. This man alive in a bed instead of dead in a trauma bay. This was why she couldn't stay invisible. This was why the mop and the badge and the fake name were never going to be enough. Because she was built for this. Not for the violence, not for the fighting, for this. For the moment when a 7-year-old boy touches his father's arm and knows that his world hasn't ended. She left the room quietly. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and pressed her palms over her eyes. Her hands were shaking again. Not from adrenaline this time, from something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 14 months. Relief. grief, gratitude, the tangled, ugly, beautiful mess of emotions that comes when you finally stop running. At 7:45 a.m., Claire walked into the hospital conference room. She had showered in the staff locker room, changed into fresh scrubs, and pulled her auburn hair back into a clean ponytail. The graze wound on her hip was properly dressed. The blood was gone from her hands, but the scar above her eyebrow was visible, and she made no effort to hide it. General Caldwell sat at the head of the table. Captain Rawlings stood beside an empty chair. Holt and Nash flanked the door like sentries. Dr. Chen and Gerald Morrison, the CEO, sat on the opposite side. And on the wall-mounted screen, connected by secure video feed, was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a Justice Department seal behind her. Assistant Attorney General Patricia Brennan. Dr. Emma Claire Stratton, Brennan began, reading from a document. Former Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army Medical Corps. Deployments, Iraq, 2017 to 2019. Afghanistan, 2020 to 2023. Decorations, Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart with Oak Leaf Cluster. Specialty, Forward Surgical Team Operations in Active Combat Zones. Claire stood at the near end of the table. She didn't sit. Soldiers report standing. Unofficial status, Brennan continued, protected witness in United States versus Greystone Defense Corporation. As of approximately 10 hours ago, your protected status has been compromised beyond any possibility of restoration. I understand. Do you? Caldwell interjected. Because you killed 4 contractors, wounded 3 others, shot the CEO of a defense corporation, and single-handedly prevented the demolition of a hospital wing. Every security camera in that parking lot was recording. Every news helicopter in Chicago was overhead within 30 minutes. Your face is on every network in the country, Claire. You're not a ghost anymore. You're the biggest story in America. Good, Claire said. The word landed like a grenade. Everyone stared. Good? Morrison repeated. I spent 14 months hiding, pretending to be less than I am, watching people struggle and suffer when I could have helped them because I was too afraid to be seen. Claire's voice was steady but raw. A man named Eddie Vargas almost died because I hesitated. A young SEAL almost suffocated because I tried to let someone else handle it. I'm done hesitating. I'm done hiding. My son is alive because you stopped hiding, Captain Rawlings said quietly. Torres is alive. A construction worker is going to walk his daughter down the aisle someday. Those things happen because you chose to be visible. Brennan leaned forward on the video feed. Dr. Stratton, I need to be direct with you. Marcus Greystone's confession has opened a door that we cannot close. He has implicated not only his own executives and field operators, but also Senator James Whitfield, who chaired the Armed Services Committee that approved and extended Greystone's contracts. Senator Whitfield has been informed that he is now a target of our investigation. What was his response? Claire asked. He issued a statement calling the allegations a politically motivated witch hunt and demanding that all charges against Greystone be dropped. Brennan paused. He also called you, specifically, a disgraced former officer with a history of mental instability who fabricated the Helmand incident for personal attention. Claire's jaw tightened. He said that publicly? 30 minutes ago. It's already on every news channel. Holt pushed off the wall. That son of a... Chief, Claire said calmly. Stand down. She looked at the screen. What do you need from me? Full deposition. Every detail of what you witnessed at the orphanage. The condition of the bodies. The ballistic evidence. The communications you intercepted between Greystone field teams and their command structure. Then testimony before a federal grand jury. And ultimately, testimony at trial. How long? The grand jury presentation could begin within 2 weeks. Trial would be 6 months to a year. And Senator Whitfield? If the evidence supports indictment, he will be charged. A sitting United States senator prosecuted for complicity in war crimes against children. It would be unprecedented. Those children deserve unprecedented. Brennan nodded. Yes, they do. Morrison cleared his throat. Dr. Stratton, while the legal process unfolds, this hospital would like to offer you the position of Director of Trauma Services. Full attending privileges, full departmental authority, a budget to build the trauma program that a Level 1 center should have. With one condition, Chen added, you stay, you teach, you share everything you know with every resident and nurse in this building. No more hiding, no more invisible interventions from the hallway. Claire walked to the window. Below, the parking lot was still marked with crime scene tape and evidence markers. A crew was replacing the shattered glass doors. Maintenance workers were patching bullet holes in the exterior walls. The hospital was already healing itself. I'll accept, she said, on my terms. Name them, Morrison said. I run trauma without interference. No administrative override on clinical decisions. No bureaucratic delays on equipment or staffing. Done. I train residents and nurses the way I was trained. Hard, honest, no room for ego. If someone can't handle the pressure, they transfer out. I don't have time to coddle people when lives are at stake. Agreed. And when the Justice Department calls, I go. No questions, no scheduling conflicts, no hospital politics. Those children in Hellman have waited 2 years for justice. They don't wait any longer. Brennan spoke from the screen. We wouldn't want it any other way, Doctor. Caldwell stood and extended his hand across the table. Welcome back, Colonel. It's Doctor now, sir. Just Doctor. You'll always be Colonel to me. He shook her hand firmly. We missed you, Claire. I missed me too. And for the first time, she meant it. The meeting broke up slowly. People filed out in small groups, talking quietly. The weight of what had happened and what was coming settled over the room like weather changing. Holt lingered by the door. So what now, Doc? Now I go check on Torres. Then I review Vargas's imaging. Then I do post-op rounds on Rawlings. I meant the big picture. The big picture is the same as the small picture. People are hurt. I fix them. That's the whole job. And Whitfield? Greystone? The trial? Claire looked at him. 37 children, Derek. The youngest was 11 months old. I found him under a collapsed wall. He was still warm. I tried to resuscitate him for 20 minutes, even though I knew he was gone, because I couldn't accept that someone had done that to a baby. Her voice didn't break. It had gone past breaking. I'm going to walk into that courtroom and I'm going to tell that story. Every detail, every face, every name I learned afterward. And when Senator Whitfield sits there in his expensive suit and calls me mentally unstable, I'm going to look the jury in the eye and dare them to look at the photographs and tell me I'm lying. Holt was quiet for a moment. Valkyrie. Don't call me that. The chooser of the slain. That's what the name means. In Norse mythology, the Valkyries decide who lives and who dies on the battlefield. I know what it means. Except your version is different. You choose, and they don't stay dead. That's your whole thing. That's why they gave you that name. Claire almost argued, almost told him the name was just a call sign, just military shorthand, just letters on a roster. But she couldn't, because it wasn't. It was the truest thing anyone had ever called her. She walked toward the door. In the hallway, Tyler Rawlings had wheeled himself out of his room. His father stood behind the wheelchair, one hand on his son's shoulder. Tyler straightened when he saw Claire. He attempted a salute with the arm that wasn't tethered to an IV pole. Claire returned it. Crisp, automatic. The muscle memory of 20 years in uniform. At ease, petty officer. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, when everything went dark last night, when the lights went out and I heard gunshots, I wasn't scared. You know why? Why? Because Dad told me Valkyrie was in the building, and I figured if Valkyrie was here, Nobody was going to die. Claire looked at this young man who almost suffocated on a gurney 12 hours ago, who was alive because she couldn't stand still while an arrogant doctor fumbled with a scalpel, who was alive because 14 months of invisibility had cracked wide open in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Nobody did die, she said softly. Not tonight. Not on your watch, Tyler said. Claire touched his shoulder the way she used to touch the shoulders of wounded soldiers before surgery. The touch that said, I'm here. I've got you. You're going to make it. Then she turned and walked down the corridor toward the ICU. Staff members stepped aside as she passed, not out of fear anymore, out of something closer to respect. The kind of respect that isn't given because of a title or a white coat or a name embroidered in blue thread. The kind that's earned by standing between people and death and refusing to move. Her phone rang, not the burner, her regular phone, a number she didn't recognize. She answered. Dr. Stratton, this is Andrea Walsh, senior producer at NBC Nightly News. We'd like to... Claire hung up. The phone rang again. Different number. Dr. Stratton, CNN here. We understand you... She hung up again. It rang a third time. She turned the phone off and put it in her pocket. The world wanted her story. The cameras wanted her face. The networks wanted the narrative of the nurse who was really a surgeon, who was really a soldier. They could wait. She had rounds to finish. Claire Stratton pushed through the ICU doors, grabbed a chart, and went to work. Not as a ghost, not as a legend, not as a headline, as a doctor. The thing she had always been, even when she tried to be nothing at all. 3 weeks after the night that burned her cover to ash, Claire Stratton stood in the basement of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., wearing a navy blue suit she'd bought the day before because she didn't own civilian clothes that weren't scrubs. The suit didn't fit right. It pulled across her shoulders and hung loose at the waist because her body was built for operating rooms and combat zones, not courtrooms. An FBI agent named Reeves stood outside the door. He'd been assigned to her protective detail since Chicago, a quiet man in his 40s who never spoke unless spoken to, and whose eyes never stopped moving. Claire respected him for both qualities. 5 minutes, Dr. Stratton, Reeves said. I know. The prosecutor wants to go over your opening statement one more. I know what I'm going to say. Reeves nodded and went back to watching the hallway. Claire looked at her hands. No blood today, no shrapnel scars visible beneath the suit sleeves. Just a woman's hands folded on a table in a room that smelled like old paper and floor wax. But those hands remembered everything. Every child she'd lifted from the rubble in Helmand. Every tiny body she tried to put back together while knowing it was already over. Every face she'd memorized because someone had to remember them. Someone had to carry their names out of that place and into the light. 37 children. The youngest was 11 months old. His name, she learned later, was Amir. Her phone buzzed. A text from Chen. Entire hospital watching C-SPAN. Torres says if you get nervous, picture Prescott's face. It helps. Claire almost laughed. Almost. The door opened. Assistant Attorney General Brennan walked in. She looked exactly the way she had on the video feed 3 weeks ago, sharp and composed, but today there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. It's a full house, Brennan said. Every major network, 62 print journalists, both Senate galleries packed. Senator Whitfield is in the front row of the public gallery with his legal team. He wants you to see him. Good. I want to see him too. His defense team is going to attack your credibility. PTSD diagnosis. The fact that you hid your identity for over a year. The fact that you killed 4 men in that hospital. They're going to paint you as unstable, violent, and delusional. Let them. Brennan studied her. You're not nervous. I've operated on a ruptured aorta during a mortar attack. This is just talking. This is talking in front of the entire country with a senator's freedom on the line. It's different. No, Claire said, it's not. The truth doesn't change depending on who's watching. Brennan almost smiled. The grand jury indicted on all counts. Greystone himself, 4 executives, 3 field commanders, and Senator Whitfield. Conspiracy, war crimes, obstruction, 17 counts total. You're our first witness. You set the tone for everything that follows. Then let's go set it. They walked through corridors that smelled like history and consequence. Reeves in front, 2 more agents behind. Claire's low heels clicked on marble floors. She felt the weight of every step. Not because she was afraid, because she understood that what happened in the next hour would determine whether 37 children received justice or became a footnote. The courtroom doors opened and the sound hit her first. Murmurs, camera shutters, the rustle of 100 people turning in their seats. Claire walked down the center aisle without looking left or right. She felt Senator Whitfield's eyes on her from the gallery. She felt the cameras tracking her face. She felt the entire country leaning forward. She took the witness stand, raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, sat down. Brennan approached the podium. Please state your full name and former rank for the record. Emma Claire Stratton, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army Medical Corps, retired. Dr. Stratton, on the night of March 14th, 2023, where were you? Forward Operating Base Reaper, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. I was the lead surgeon of a forward surgical team attached to the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Can you describe what happened that night? Claire took a breath. Not a deep one, just enough to fill the space between who she was now and who she'd been then. At approximately 22:30 hours, we received reports of an explosion at a compound 3 kilometers east of our position. Initial reports indicated an insurgent weapons cache had detonated. We were directed to respond for potential civilian casualties. And when you arrived? The compound was a children's orphanage run by a local aid organization. It housed 37 children between the ages of 11 months and 14 years, along with 4 adult staff members. What did you find? Claire's voice stayed level. Her hands stayed still. But inside, she was back in the dust and the dark, stepping over rubble, hearing sounds that no amount of silence would ever erase. I found the building partially collapsed, significant structural damage consistent with heavy weapons fire, not a single detonation. The blast pattern was wrong for a weapons cache. It was concentrated on the residential wing where the children slept. You're saying the damage wasn't from an internal explosion. I'm saying someone fired on that building from the outside. Multiple points of impact, heavy caliber rounds, at least 1 rocket-propelled grenade. The children were targeted in their beds. The courtroom went silent, not the polite silence of attention, the airless silence of horror. How many survivors did you find, Dr. Stratton? None. The word fell into the room like a stone into a well. Claire heard someone in the gallery stifle a sob. I entered the residential wing with my medical team. We found 37 children dead. Most had been killed by blast fragmentation and structural collapse. Some had been killed by direct gunfire. Several of the older children had defensive wounds on their arms and hands. They had tried to protect the younger ones. What did you do? I attempted resuscitation on every child I could reach. I performed triage procedures on bodies that I knew were beyond saving because I couldn't accept that someone had done this to children. I worked for 4 hours. Claire paused. None of them survived. During your time at the site, did you discover anything that indicated who was responsible? Yes. I found shell casings consistent with NATO standard 5.56 millimeter ammunition. I found fragments of a rocket-propelled grenade with markings that matched inventory assigned to Greystone defense contractors operating in the area. And I found a communications device, a satellite phone, partially buried in rubble near the perimeter. What was on that phone? Text messages between Greystone Field Team Leader Randall Pike and an unknown number. The messages discussed a weapons transfer that had gone wrong. A local contact had betrayed them. The children's orphanage was being used as a meeting point for the exchange. When the deal collapsed, Pike ordered the building destroyed to eliminate witnesses. Witnesses? The children were witnesses? The older children could identify faces. Some of them had seen the Greystone vehicles arriving. Pike's messages specifically referenced, and I quote, "No eyes left. Clean the site." A sound rose from the gallery, not a gasp, something lower and angrier. The sound of 300 people realizing what had been done in their country's name. Brennan let the silence hold for 5 seconds. Then she asked, "What happened after you reported your findings?" "I submitted a formal report to my commanding officer, General Thomas Caldwell. I was ordered to testify before a classified military tribunal. During my testimony, I presented the physical evidence, the shell casings, the satellite phone, the ballistic analysis, and my medical findings regarding the cause of death for each child. And the result of that tribunal? 3 Greystone field operatives, including Randall Pike, were dishonorably discharged. Greystone Defense lost its Pentagon contract, but no criminal charges were filed against the company's executives. And the question of who authorized the contract extension that put those operators in that province at that time was never addressed. Why not? Claire looked directly at Senator Whitfield. He sat in the front row of the gallery, silver-haired and square-jawed, flanked by 4 attorneys in suits that cost more than Claire earned in a year. He met her eyes. He didn't blink. "Because the investigation was deliberately limited in scope," Claire said. "Certain questions were not asked. Certain documents were not subpoenaed. Certain names were never mentioned. I was told that the matter was resolved and that further inquiry would compromise national security. Did you accept that?" "No, I resigned my commission. I was told that my testimony had made me a target and that I needed to disappear. General Caldwell's office helped construct a new identity for my protection. I became Claire Donovan. I took a nursing position at Ridgewood General Hospital in Chicago, and I spent 14 months pretending to be invisible. Why did you come forward now?" "Because a man was dying on a table, and the doctor treating him was pressing on the wrong spot. Because a 24-year-old SEAL was suffocating and nobody was moving fast enough. Because I took an oath, 2 oaths, one as a doctor and one as an officer, and both of them mean the same thing. You don't stand by while people die, not if you can help it." Brennan turned to the bench. "Your Honor, at this time the prosecution would like to enter into evidence the security camera footage from Ridgewood General Hospital, showing Dr. Stratton's actions on the night of the attack." The screens in the courtroom lit up. Claire watched herself from a distance. The grainy footage showed a woman in oversized scrubs, dropping a mop, walking into a trauma bay, and plunging her hands into a dying man's leg. It showed the same woman shouldering a doctor out of the way and placing a chest tube in 45 seconds. It showed her taking a weapon from a SEAL and disappearing into a dark corridor. It showed everything. "Dr. Stratton," Brennan's voice pulled her back. "Marcus Greystone sent a team of professional killers to that hospital. They cut the power. They planted thermite charges on the structural supports. They intended to murder you and everyone near you and collapse the building to hide the evidence. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you fought them alone?" "Not alone. Master Chief Derek Holt and Petty Officer Nash defended the ICU. Charge Nurse Ruth Kavanaugh locked down the floor and protected patients. Dr. Sarah Chen stayed in the building when she could have run. A lot of people fought that night. But you were the one who reached the command vehicle. You were the one who stopped the detonation." With 9 seconds remaining, yes. "And the reason Marcus Greystone sent that team, the reason he was willing to kill 160 people in a hospital, was to prevent you from doing exactly what you're doing right now, testifying." "Yes. He was afraid of you." Claire looked at Whitfield again. The senator's jaw was tight. His attorneys were scribbling notes. His composure was intact, but his eyes had changed. Something had shifted behind them, the first crack in a wall that had held for 2 years. "He should have been," Claire said. The defense team cross-examined for 2 hours. They attacked her PTSD diagnosis. They questioned her decision to hide her identity. They suggested that her combat experiences had left her delusional, prone to conspiracy thinking, unable to distinguish between battlefield trauma and reality. Claire answered every question the same way, directly, without emotion, without hesitation. The way she'd answered questions from commanding officers while holding a scalpel inside a dying soldier. You don't have the luxury of being flustered when someone's life depends on your clarity. "Dr. Stratton," the defense attorney said, his voice smooth and practiced. "You killed 4 men in that hospital. Does that trouble you?" "Yes. Yet you did it without hesitation. I hesitated for 14 months. When I finally acted, people lived. When I hesitated, people died. I've learned the difference." "You admit to suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder." "I do." "And you expect this jury to trust the testimony of someone with a documented psychiatric condition?" Claire leaned forward slightly. "I expect this jury to trust the shell casings that were recovered from the orphanage. I expect them to trust the satellite phone messages. I expect them to trust the ballistic analysis, the financial records, and Marcus Greystone's own confession. My psychiatric condition doesn't change any of that evidence. It just explains why I had nightmares about it for 2 years." "No further questions," the defense attorney said. He didn't look satisfied. He looked like a man who had just realized that the witness he'd planned to destroy had destroyed him instead. Claire stepped down from the stand at 4:17 p.m. The courtroom erupted. Reporters surged toward the doors. Camera crews jostled for position. The noise was deafening. She walked out through a side entrance. Reeves led her down a back corridor to a private room where Caldwell was waiting. He stood when she entered. "How do you feel?" "Like I just finished a surgery. Tired, relieved, worried about complications." "There won't be any. The prosecution team says your testimony was the strongest they've ever seen. Clear, factual, unshakable." Whitfield's attorneys were rattled. Whitfield wasn't. Whitfield is a politician. He'll rattle when the handcuffs go on. Claire sat down. She looked at her hands again, still steady. Still the same hands that had mopped floors, clamped arteries, fired weapons, and now pointed at the men who murdered 37 children. The same hands that had done everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Holt. "Watch the whole thing. Torres is awake. He says you're his hero. I told him to get in line." Another text. From Tyler Rawlings. "Saw you on TV. You look like you wanted to punch that lawyer. Don't worry. Nash said he'll do it for you." Another. From Ruth, the charge nurse at Ridgewood. The whole floor watched in the break room. Jessica cried. Again. "We're all proud of you, Claire." And one more, from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. "Dr. Stratton, my name is Fatima Nazari. I was the director of the orphanage in Helmand. I survived because I was in Kabul that night. I have spent 2 years trying to find someone who would listen. Today you spoke for my children. I cannot express what that means, but I want you to know their names. All 37. Whenever you are ready, I will tell you." Claire stared at the message. The letters blurred. For the first time since Helmand, for the first time since the night she knelt in rubble and held children she couldn't save, tears ran down her face. Not the choked, suppressed tears of a woman trying to be strong. Real tears. The kind that come when something broken inside you finally starts to heal. She typed back with shaking hands. "I'm ready. Tell me their names." 2 months later, Claire stood in the atrium of Ridgewood General Hospital at 6:45 a.m. She wore a white coat. Her name was embroidered above the pocket. Dr. Emma Claire Stratton, Director of Trauma Services. She had fought the embroidery. Chen had insisted. The hospital had changed around her. The bullet holes were patched. The shattered glass was replaced. The east wing had been reinforced after the thermite charges were removed. But the real changes were invisible. The staff walked differently, talked differently, treated each other differently. Something about almost dying together in the dark had burned away the petty hierarchies and small cruelties that infect every hospital. Prescott was gone, transferred to a radiology program in Ohio. 3 residents she'd been training for 6 weeks, each of them terrified of her and motivated by that terror to be better than they thought they could be. "What do we know?" Claire asked as she gowned up. 3-vehicle collision on I-90, the charge nurse reported. 5 patients, 2 critical. First ambulance arriving now. Bay assignments? 1 and 2 for the criticals, 3 through 5 for the others. "Who's my lead resident on Bay 1? A young woman stepped forward. Dr. Amy Park, 28 years old, 3rd-year resident, smart, quick, still learning to trust her own hands. "Dr. Park, what's our protocol for a multi-casualty MVC? Primary survey, ABCDE, stabilize and prioritize. Imaging for the criticals, type and cross, notify OR if surgical intervention is needed. And if the patient crashes before imaging, we treat what we find, hands in, eyes open." "Good." Claire pulled on her gloves. "If you get overwhelmed, you call me. If you get scared, you call me. If you get a result you don't understand, you call me. I will always come. That's the deal." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Call me Dr. Stratton. Or Claire. Or hey you. I don't care. Just don't freeze. Freezing kills patients." The ambulance bay doors opened. The first gurney came through. Claire moved to meet it. Behind her, the team moved in formation, each person in position, each pair of hands ready. This was the part they didn't show on the news. Not the testimony, not the trial, not the headlines that read, "War hero surgeon testifies against senator," and "the nurse who fought back." This was the real work. The daily, grinding, unglamorous work of standing in a room where someone is dying and refusing to let them go. The trial continued without her for now. Whitfield had been arrested 2 weeks earlier. Perp walked past cameras in handcuffs. Greystone's executives were cooperating. The financial records confirmed everything Claire had testified to. The prosecution was confident. Justice, slow and imperfect, was grinding forward. But Claire didn't think about that in the trauma bay. She thought about the patient in front of her. A 40-year-old woman, restrained driver, steering column impact. Probable splenic laceration. Pressure dropping. "Talk to me, Dr. Park." Abdomen is rigid, guarding in the left upper quadrant. BP 90/60 and falling. She needs an OR. She needs you to be calm first. Take a breath. What's the next step? Park took a breath, steadied herself. 2 large-bore IVs, type and cross. Notify the OR. Prepare for emergent laparotomy. Do it. Park moved, confident, decisive, the way Claire had taught her to move, the way someone taught Claire to move in a tent in Afghanistan 20 years ago. Claire watched her resident work and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of a woman running from her past. Real hope. The kind that comes from building something, from teaching someone, from knowing that when you're gone, the hands you trained will keep saving lives. At 8:30 a.m., the woman with the splenic laceration was in the OR. Park was assisting. The other 4 MBC patients were stable. Claire stood at the nurse's station, writing post-procedure notes with a coffee going cold beside her. Ruth walked up and set a fresh cup next to the cold one. "You know," Ruth said, 14 months ago, you told me Mr. Patterson in 308 looked a little off. You said you were probably wrong. I remember. You were the worst liar I'd ever met." "I know. I'm glad you stopped lying." Claire picked up the fresh coffee. "Me too, Ruth. Me too." She drank her coffee. She finished her notes. She was learning them slowly, deliberately, one by one. 37 names. 37 children who deserved to be remembered by someone who had held them. At the end of the day, Claire walked out of Ridgewood General Hospital through the front entrance. Not the loading dock, not the back corridor, the front door. She walked past the spot where she used to park her mop cart, past the bench where she used to eat lunch alone, past the place in the parking lot where she had shot a billionaire in the kneecap and stopped a building from collapsing. The sun was setting over Chicago. Orange light cut through the buildings and hit the hospital windows and made them glow like something sacred. Claire Stratton stood in that light for a moment. She didn't hunch her shoulders. She didn't lower her eyes. She didn't reach for a mop or a fake name or the comforting weight of invisibility. She stood tall, 5'4" and built like a weapon, and wearing a white coat with her real name on it. A surgeon, a soldier, a witness. A woman who had walked through the worst things human beings could do to each other and come out the other side still fighting, still saving, still choosing life over death every single time for every single patient, no matter what it cost. The ghost was gone, the legend was real, and Dr. Emma Claire Stratton was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not hiding, not running, not invisible, standing in the light with steady hands and clear eyes, ready for whatever came next. Because that was the truth about Valkyrie. She didn't choose who died, she chose who lived, and she chose everyone.